Hey, welcome back to another segment of Unlock the Door Radio here with your host, Michael Cross. And before I get into I guarantee, very interesting subject, I would encourage people to go to my website at michaelcross.net. Check out some articles there and some other thought provoking information. Well, anyway, tonight, what I would actually like to deal with is something that, I am sure this would be so controversial to someone like John McCain. I don't know how he'd react. Anyway, the thing I would like to propose is that if we look at politicians today and try to see if there's any of them out there on the world scene that seem to be almost the embodiment of Ronald Reagan, I would say that would be none other than Russia's Vladimir Putin. Okay, now, the thing is, I'd like to go into this and actually demonstrate why you could actually say Putin is almost like a reincarnation of the spirit of Ronald Reagan. There's a lot of similarities, a few differences, but the similarities are almost uncanny. Now, let's just begin. The first election I ever voted in was for Ronald Reagan back in 1980, and I remember back then that the economy was just in shambles. The interest rates were through the roof. You had inflation. But most importantly, you had a malaise that permeated American society. It was a pessimism about the future. There was this sense of, who are we? Where are we going? And Ronald Reagan was able to use his skills, his communication skills, his dealing with traditional values that symbolized America, and saying we need to get back to those traditions. We need to get back to those principles that were part of the Constitution. And I'll tell you something. I think that was probably more important than all of his economic policy. All of it. Because the mood of the people will set the direction of the country. When people feel pessimistic, they don't take chances. They don't invest. They feel uncertain. And so therefore, it kind of slows you down. Whether it's an individual who's uncertain or a society. And Ronald Reagan was able to really inspire people, especially young people, to get out there and make something of yourself. Take risk, innovate, and so forth. And the economy boomed because of that. And a lot of times the left will say, it was just selfishness and so forth. But the thing is, it didn't matter. The standard of living went up. And a lot of it had to do with Ronald Reagan's charisma and his ability to get people motivated. And that's true leadership. Now, going to Vladimir Putin, I'll tell you this. First time I went to Russia was around 2000. And it was dismal. Okay, the country had been looted by oligarchs using their special privileges to just suck up the wealth of the country, and then many times just take off and go live in villas in London and so forth. The people were in a state of poverty that was unimaginable to most Americans. I mean, I'd been to Mexico, and seriously, Russia was in shambles. And Putin was able to use those same kinds of skills to get people to believe in themselves again, and to have faith in the Russian traditions and the values that made Russia great for so long. And he had to go against all the entrenched leftover vestiges of communism, and he really was able to pull things together. And, the last time I went to Russia, maybe a decade after that, things were so much better. People optimistic. And I did not find anyone who was negative towards Putin. Okay? The only people I encountered who were negative to Putin were people that were Americans living in Russia. And not all of them. Most of them were actually like, hey, I like the way things are going. There was a few of them that were like really negative, but that's to be expected. Okay, I mean, the thing is the Russian people were behind him. And that's what's important. And he's been able, when I went there originally around 2000, people were afraid to invest because you had a mafia that was entrenched. They were afraid to have a family because they were uncertain about even if they were going to be able to eat, in the next week. And things have really turned around. Birth rates going up. The government's really encouraging families there. Putin even said, all Russian women should have at least 3 kids. Not forcing it, but he said that should be an ideal. And people are just have an optimism that didn't have them. And that means people will invest. That means people will look to the future and make a better future. And a lot of it has to do with the fact of being able to see where you came from and have respect for your traditions and an admiration for the things that make you Russian. Just the same way as Reagan was able to get people to have an admiration for the things that made them American. Now, the next thing, of course, is restoring pride in the people. Every film, I remember in the late 70s, everything was like negative. If you were in the military, you were like, oh, baby killers and that sort of thing. The TV shows would always present either the mentally challenged Vietnam vet or some criminal or something like that. And there was kind of a real negativity towards anything that was American. And that changed. And again, Putin has been able to get people to go back before communism and try to get people to have a faith in who they are. And there is one difference I do have to say, though. There is a difference when it comes to religion. Ronald Reagan was a little bit quiet about his religious values. Even though he was strongly religious, he didn't usually bring it up too much except for making a reference like, God bless America or something like that in the State of the Union. Vladimir Putin is far more open about his Christian faith and makes public statements about it and makes statements about the family and tradition and God and so forth. In fact, last year he even said that the West, like Northwestern Europe, was really in danger because they're ignoring their Christian heritage, that they need to get back to it. And they need to get back to cherishing the family ideals. And I'm sure most Americans didn't read that. I mean, most pastors didn't pass that along to their congregations. I'm really kind of, we'll get into that later, at some other point when it comes to the state of mainstream religion in the United States and the leaders, so-called, of these mega churches. But the thing is that Putin has been able to really get things, especially amongst the young people. Putin has a lot of support amongst the young. They really adore him. And the young people really adored Ronald Reagan. That's why, if you look at the demographic of the most Republican voters in the United States, you will find it's those people who came of age in 1980, the ones who graduated high school between 1976 and 1984. That demographic segment is the most strongly Republican. Okay? They look back at maybe their older brothers and sisters who were hippies or something like that, and they're like, no, I don't want anything to do with that. In the same way, maybe young people in Russia are looking at the past when it was communist going, I don't want anything to do with that. And so they really like Putin. Now, we get into another big difference, huge difference, or similarity, I should say. Sorry. I should say difference in regards to how that Bible scripture, the first shall be last and the last shall be first. Reagan came into office at a time when he was having to encounter an authoritarian regime with an expansionist foreign policy, that being the USSR. Vladimir Putin has come into power where he has to stand up against an authoritarian regime with an expansionist foreign policy, that being the United States. My, have things changed. Take a look at the world today. It's not Russia and China causing all the wars. It's not Russia and China that's messed up Libya and Syria and other countries. It's not Russia and China that are bombing other countries with their drones, aside from Libya and Syria. It is not that, Russia and China. It is the United States. I think we've kind of lost our bearings. We're starting to get into this idea that might makes right. Very Machiavellian way of looking at things. That's very dangerous because it's also coming home to bite us when it comes to our domestic police and all of these stories. You see it, in on YouTube and in alternative media and sometimes in the mainstream media about police abusing their powers. Well, if your foreign policy and what makes you known around the world is, if I don't like what you're doing, I'm going to smash you. If I don't like you, even if you're not doing anything, I'm going to smash you. That's going to filter down to the police. Sorry, that's just the way it is. So I think really it's, again, we get into psychology. And we're really facing a major threat. I would see that 5 years from now, we might be a police state in the United States. Russia will be the place that'll be, have a lot of freedoms in comparison. It's a scary thought, but it seems to be where we're heading. Now, lastly, both Putin and Reagan showed that they see that their bodies were temples. They work out. They promote physical fitness. You would see Reagan promoting it, and showing himself going out and riding a horse and chopping wood and just being physically active. A vibrancy. It showed a vibrancy in our leadership. Putin, the same way, goes out, horseback riding, weightlifting, and doing all these other things. And that may be one of the reasons why he has such appeal. Okay, he's not a young guy in the traditional sense. He's I think he's past 60, but he looks like he's like 40 because he keeps in shape. And again, it's a symbol for people to look at. Not just the fact that he's got muscles, but the fact that he goes out there and challenges himself. I don't see that in most of our leaders today in the United States, okay? I mean, it's just not there. And I think that really when you switch on news, and it's even to the point that Putin was out there releasing rare tigers into the wild, trying to restore the habitat of the Siberian tiger. And our news media reports that one of the tigers he released in this really noble venture has been killing goats of Chinese farmers in northernmost China. I mean, come on. Look at how stupid and idiotic that is to report something like that and make it look like he's the bad guy because he's trying to do something good for the environment. Where were the environmentalists say, hey, wait a minute, that's not, it's part of releasing animals into the wild and trying to restore their habitat. But Putin gets criticized by the media for doing that. Now, if it had been Obama releasing wolves out in Oregon or something, and those wolves had killed some sheep, the media would be saying, yeah, but that's kind of a price we have to pay, But, of course, our media does not have its responsibility of informing people in an impartial manner. The United States media is basically a propaganda machine out there to keep the masses out there shopping, keep them supporting whatever wars are going on. And really, it's, things have changed, haven't they? Things have changed. I mean, compared to Pravda during the USSR, Pravda would come across as being actually an informative source of news compared to our network news today in the United States. Well, anyway, that's all the time we have now. I just thought I would just kind of share those thoughts and, agree, disagree, whatever. You don't have to take my word for it. Just give it some thought there. Vladimir Putin, the new Ronald Reagan. Anyway, signing off now, and thank you for listening to Unlock the Door Radio here on UCY TV.